Okay, here I am again. This is part 2 of the sexual attraction lecture. Let me get my clicker. The first part I did all about the animals, and I hope you remember all of that different stuff, especially the 2 goals of selection where we're looking for good DNA and we're also looking for protection and provision. So now what I'm going to do is take all that animal stuff and transfer it over to humans. This is called sociobiology. And this is when we're looking at the biological causes for our behavior as humans. Now that might seem straightforward, but sometimes I call this being hardwired, if I can write this on here, because I'll talk about stalking in cats. You don't have to teach stalking in cats, it's hardwired. So a lot of our behavior as men and women is hardwired, especially when it comes to attraction. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about then has to do with attraction, with the assumption that you're going to have kids. So it kind of doesn't explain gay relationships very well, but it does explain a lot of the attraction in the heterosexual world. Okay, so David Buss is one of the most famous sociobiologists. And what he would have men and women do back in the 80s and 90s is just write down, what did you do when you tried to get a girl? What did you do when you tried to get a guy? And he would come up with these lists of the most common tactics that men and women would do. So we would have these lists, and then the list, you don't have to write any of this down, but look at the guys pretending like you're not interested. Don't act like you care too much, right? Pretending to be polite, working out, that makes sense. I love this one, lying about self. If I was in class, I would show stuff about wedding crashers right there. Now for the girls, okay, they like playing hard to get or being easy. That's about choice, right? We talked about choosy female last time. These two, I always like go into more detail in my gender class because it's clowning or girls out like silly clowns, and I really like harp on that, but I also really like it because I love ditzy women. And let me see. So in other studies, since he had these most common lists, what he would do is he would bring in married couples, so straight couples, and he would say, okay, on this list, check the things off you did, husbands. Wives, you check the things off you did. Now, the 2 most things for the husbands were this. Either when they were trying to get their wife, they bragged about how many things they had, or they showed her how much stuff that they had. So it all came down to resources. Remember the bowerbirds? They could procure a lot of stuff to put on their nest, right? Same thing with men. They're just showing the females, I can meet goal number 2, which is safety and security. I protect and provide for you. Now, there's all these silly could show in the studies. They would say, oh, I would brag about how much money I would earn, I have status at work or accomplishments or how good I am in sports, or I would directly do things that would show that I was dominant or had money, right? Okay, good DNA, right? That's DNA right here. Flexing muscles and strutting, but the rest of it is about accomplishing. Okay, women, this is the sad part of the lesson, is that they only had one thing they did, and that was alter their appearance in some way. They just changed the way they look to be pretty. And I love pretty women, but you're more than just an ornament on a tree. You have to be something besides a pretty box. There has to be something inside the box. So we'll get into this in more detail. If you were in my gender class, I'd go off on this, but you can see again, choice comes into play right down here. Okay, so now we see that women are competing and focusing on different tactics. That plays into, my first lecture on this. And men compete and focus on a different set of tactics. It doesn't always have to be physical dominance. Sometimes it's status with respect to money or other things as well. Okay, to go back to the goals of intersexual selection, if you think about what just happened in David Buss's studies, men were bragging. They were talking about all the stuff they had, or they were showing girls they had stuff. This is number 2, right down here. Girls, on the other hand, were focusing on their appearance, which is about DNA. So they're up here on goal number 1. It's not that guys and girls don't focus on the other goal, but you start to see a separation, a battle, a kind of difference between the two sexes, between men and women, and what their goals or their tactics are when it comes to mating. Now, if I can get my clicker, if you remember back to, besides the goals of selection, that selection drives the competition. What does that mean? Well, remember, intersexual the same thing as choice. So if women choose men that have money or that are, muscular, I'll just abbreviate that, then men are going to compete based on these traits. But if men are choosing women that are like pretty or they're skinny, right, then women are going to compete based on those traits because the opposite sex kind of drives the competition. We saw this within the animal examples. Now it's happening within the human examples. That's why I like sociobiology. Now, one final thing that really, drives this whole difference between the sexes home is this. Down here, it's supposed to say passive to dominant, low status or no money to a lot of money. Okay, and so let's just say if this was money right here, and this is how pretty you are. Well, see, women are focusing on this. We already saw this with David Buss's study. And men are focusing on this. It's not like I made this up and David Buss says, well, we start to see this differentiation between the sexes. And so he says the other thing that happens is if you're a man, your level of money determines what kind of girl you can get. Doesn't determine how much money she has, it determines how pretty she is. And so pretty and money go together, or pretty and dominant go together. Now, if I'm not so dominant right down here, that determines how pretty of a girl I can get too. Now, I know it's a silly movie, it's kind of I love this movie because I'm in love with Alice Eve, but when Alice Eve hooks up with Jay Baruchel, all of his friends are going, why is she with you? Because it's a mismatch, right? He's not dominant, he doesn't have any money, and she's super hot and pretty. Okay, so let's get off of that and let's go into prettiness, speaking of which. When I talk about attraction or attractiveness, especially in my gender class, I focus in on this concept of beauty. It's different across different cultures. Now, one of the things that's been studied extensively is this body ratio and its waist to hip ratio. And so one of the things that Singh and other researchers started to find, if you measure from here to here, there's this golden ratio of 0.7 where your waist, of course, is smaller than your hips, and so that's why the number on the numerator is smaller than the denominator. Now, I would argue it goes this way too, to where your boobs or your bust is. And if I get this on here, that goes along with the traditional hourglass figure, right? Because that's what we've held women as a standard to. And if you even think about back in the Victorian days when women wore corsets, it held to this standard to try to keep you at 0.7. Doesn't really matter what weight you are, which is a good thing in some way. Okay, so they've looked at this to measure, why are men attracted to this ratio, and there's of course variations, like some men like a 1, that would be like your waist and your hips are the same, a 1, right? This is the curvy one, that's the hourglass, it says it on here. But then if you think about from certain ethnicities, they like bigger on bottom, right? This would be more like swimmer's body, like a triangle, kind of like that if I did a good. Okay, so one of my favorite models of all time, but I'm European, Anglo, is Twiggy, and Twiggy is a stick, a twig, right? She is a 1. That's going to say 1 over there, but she, waist to hip equals 1. But that comes from Anglo standards. It's not that every Anglo person likes that, but a lot of European models tend towards this Anglo. If you think about Kim Kardashian, that girl ain't no 1. She's super curvy. And so her waist hip ratio is probably, I have it less than 0.7 because she's real curvy, right? Maybe a 0.6 or a 0.5. Okay, so Throughout history, what they've done is they've measured people. I mean, Marilyn Monroe wasn't a small girl, size 14. Sophia Loren was very voluptuous. And if you think about across time, that our standards started to change to get skinnier and skinnier, kind of towards this one, not exactly, but towards. Now let's go back to the 0.7 ratio for a minute. Why do we like it so much? Well, one thing I've already mentioned, we just see it as more pretty. Okay, if that was the end of the story, who cares? But another thing that comes into play is that these women are seen as, and obviously should say, are more capable of bearing children. I'm not going to say they're completely healthier, but that's what we call breeding hips, right? Like if you're very, very skinny, maybe you have childbirth problems, but if you have hips, of a certain size, it helps out. And furthermore, this was demonstrated that these women have higher estrogen levels, so fewer complications in childbirth, they're more able to bear children, blah, blah, blah. And so that maybe men aren't just going, hey, she's hot, but subconsciously, hardwired, we're kind of geared towards these women because they're more likely to be fertile and have babies. Okay, for men, I would argue you should be like this, the apple, I think it was called. It's not like I'm like this, but you should be buff, right? So 0.7 should go this way. And maybe you don't want to have a big rear end. I guess you could be 0.7 the other way too. And my silly joke comes from Neighbors, because if you think about on Neighbors, if this can go on here, it's like, yeah, Zach is like got the arrow that points to his you know what. Now if you look at Seth Rogen, you're going, he's not exactly, he's the opposite of it. He's kind of like an apple or a pear. Okay, so let me go to the next thing. I'm not particularly saying this, but there's been a lot of research that's been done on this, and then it says this. As a man gets older, maybe there's a cutoff point here. He procures more resources, so he's more attractive because he has more stuff. He has a better nest. But as a woman gets younger, she's more likely to bear children. Now, you don't go too young, but at a certain point right in here, you're going to have menopause, like you have your first period. There's a window in here. And so that's why we're always pushing towards the younger part of the window, even though maybe that's a bad thing, because it's like that's more fertile. And in our man brain, our reptilian man brain, you know what I mean? That attractiveness kind of relates, just like the 0.7 ratio, into fertility. It's not like we're constantly thinking about that, but it's been hardwired. Same thing with girls. They want security. They're not constantly like, oh my God, I got to be a gold digger, but at the same time, they don't want to be insecure. Okay, so Kenrick and Keefe. They found that across a wide range of cultures, older men have a tendency for younger women. I've been arguing this is from an evolutionary perspective, that they're more fertile, but they went through all these classified ads. I forgot I had Anna Nicole Smith. Y'all probably don't even know who she is, but it's like, is she with this dude right here because he's hot? Or is it because he was a billionaire? I know I'm picking on a silly. One of the areas I really, really like talking about is neoteny. I have this formal definition, the retention of juvenile. What does that mean? Means you're baby faced when you're adult. That's like I am. I'm 53, but man, when I was like 20 something like y'all, I looked like I was 8. It was not good. It's not good to be baby faced or neotenized as a man. Now, I tell you, we like our girls neotenized. Like, even if you're a grown woman, but you act like a little girl, that's something we celebrate in our culture. Not as a man, unless, I don't know, in gay culture, would have done it cleaned up because everybody's like, oh, he's like a little boy. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I like girls for some dumb reason. Okay, so Betty Boo, part of neoteny is this. You have the big eyes, and then you have diminutive features except for the lips right here. So you baby facedness, the big eyes, maybe not so diminutive here. I wish you could see her. You could see Christina Ricci. She's one of my favorites. But K-pop, if you think about Asian culture, I mean, look at this girl. This girl is like of age, I guess, but she looks such little girlish, right? These same things, you can see the way they celebrate this, and that's also an anime. Because if I look from here up, then I look at a little girl. If I look from here down, I don't. And so it's the neotenization of women because it perpetuates again that women are childish. And I don't want to go into this whole thing, but I wish you were my gender class because I would add a lot more onto this part. Okay, if I was in class, I could show a lot more of these classified ads, and I should get some newer ones. But anyway, think back to intersexual selection, and when I show you a few of these ads, what traits, oops, I don't have this on, what traits are they asking for, and how do they describe themselves with traits? And it goes right back to what David Buss says, and it goes right back to the animals, the two goals, about DNA or stuff. Okay, so good genes, DNA, or stuff, the two goals. Now, women seeking men, I'll pick on first. If you look right here, she talks about the way she looks right away, you know. She even says she's picky. And then when she goes into the man part, let me see if I can get a different color and be fancier. See, he's got to be handsome. That's attractiveness. Okay, she does focus on that. But see, tall, stable, secure, affluent, successful, gentleman who's athletic. If you're an equestrian, I grew up riding horses, but rednecks just ride horses. We're not equestrians. You know what I mean? That's what rich people do when they ride horses. And then Dom Perignon, Bubble Bass, all this other stuff. It's like, what are you looking for? Money, security, nest. What are you willing to offer? And a lot of it has to do with attractiveness. Now, I know I picked this one on purpose, but exotic dancer. Look, she says I'm 30, but I look younger. And then what does she want? Right down here, see if I can get back on the red. I'm mostly attracted to stocky or heavier men that are very assertive and can hold their own in a fight. And so the dominance thing, you know, of course it's like, you know, but you see dominance is not asking for dominance, is pretty with dominant. Two different characteristics coming together, thus cross characteristics. So now woman seeking man, this is actually from Scottsdale, Arizona about 8 years ago, and right here she says the only thing that makes me happy is cash in my account. And so she's like willing to be the sweet little thing that you can have sex with, but it's like, I just want the money. Oh, let me pick on the men. Okay, so men seeking women. Men are simpler. I'm a multimillionaire who's 52 years old, and I want a girl that's 18 and 26 that is going to have some children. That's it. End of the story. Okay, so besides incurable romantic, do you seek, I just want to use this on somebody one time, do you seek the wisdom and experience of a financially secure hip older gentleman? Oh my god. Anyway, but it's focusing on the arts, sailing, hot tubs, travel, B&Bs, dining, all that's money, money, money. What can I offer you? And I want attractive and slim. He focuses in on her looks. This is another on Scottsdale. This is again from about 8 years ago. I don't understand this somewhat submissive and single living alone. It's like, when are you a stalker? But anyway, I want to pamper you, money, all these things, multiple homes, world travel, clothes, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, oh, I'm educated financially. It goes on and on and on about his dominance. Even if you just look at the title, brains, brawn, dominance, he's got it all. He's the perfect guy. He's a caveman with money. Okay, so David Buss, and hopefully this makes sense, said also sometimes the competition between men and men becomes ugly, or women and women. It's not always positive, like, hey, let's both go to the gym, both work out, and see who can lift the most weights, and whoever's the winner gets the girl. It's like, no, sometimes like you, whenever, are a little bit sneakier when it comes to the competition. Just like with the Bowerbirds, I didn't talk about this, but sometimes instead of decorating their own nest, they wait for the other males to leave and go steal the other male's stuff and put it on their own nest and get the girl that way. So anyway, how do males compete with males in a negative way? They usually insult each other based on status or dominance. Instead of making myself richer or have more physical, prowess, it's like I always like bust balls on other guys talking about how they're pussies or they're chumps or they don't have any money or they're bums. All these different words we have in our lexicon for these kinds of people. Now, the competition for girls when it gets ugly down here, if my pen is on, usually, oops, I should pick a different color, revolves around slut shaming, promiscuity, or calling girls ugly. You know what I mean? And so you can make yourself prettier or just worry about your own sexuality, or you could like slut shame, Easy A, if you know the movie, or, make the other girls seem worse. Now, choice can get negative too. Of course, the most negative choice in the whole world is rape, where men force themselves on women, and that's not good in any scenario. But this is David Butts, not Tim. The choice for women, and sometimes women do this, they use sex as a tool. They withhold sex and they use it as a tool because it's a means of manipulation. So that's a different kind of choice. Okay, so to wrap all this up, and I wish we were in class because I would go off on it in a lot of detail, I love to talk about Grease because the movie Grease has every bit of this box. If you think about male on male, crime, then the T-Birds. It's like, well, when Danny wants to get close, to Sandy, like they start busting his chops. I usually show this part of the movie in class. And so you've got to it's the whole bros before hoes thing. It's like, look cool in front of your bros, don't worry about the girls. And if you think about the Pink Ladies in Rizzo, they're all busting Sandy's chops. Like, why are you a virgin? Come on, won't you smoke, drink, act like bad girl. And so Danny tries to be the bad boy, but a lot of times, let me see if my pen is on here, he's not really this guy, but that's the facade, the persona he has to show so that he doesn't get his balls busted by these guys over here. And so see, Sandy, she's trying to be like this, where I'm going to be Miss Tough Girl that uses sex to my advantage because I'll fit in with these girls, but that's not really her. The two of them have this dilemma going on, and here's the dilemma for Sandy. It's like, oh, do I be her or her, the slut or the prude? And for Danny, it's like, am I going to be the pussy or kind of the dick? And so that men and women still have these dualities when it comes to trying to fit into these categories. Last topic, then we're done with this lecture, and I'll put a big pretty bow on it, is assortative mating. Assortative mating means like goes with like. I've been arguing pretty goes with rich, right? Dominant goes with pretty. Now I'm going to argue this, like sometimes you match. That's why they call socks mates, right? You match, you look alike. And so phenotype matching means you physically match the person that you hook up with. A lot of times boyfriends and girlfriends are mistaken for brothers and sisters because they look so much alike. Your phenotype says something about your genotype. The other thing is assortative narcissism. Sometimes if you pick somebody, when I look at the couples in Scottsdale, I always think this, when you look like them, why you're picking them is because they look like you, which means you're just picking you to date. Okay, so anyway, that's the subcategory of phenotype matching. Oh yeah, but see, sometimes people don't phenotype match. This is Iggy Pop. Look at his girlfriend. These people don't seem like they match by phenotype, or these people either. Okay, but David Buss in 1993, the same person that argued for cross character. Remember, cross character is different. Oops, I was supposed to say cross character. It's different. Assortative, he says, well, sometimes people do match on age, actually, the exact same age. And I think you better match on education level, not necessarily race, but maybe religion and ethnic background and these three things. Man, when you start having kids, that's going to be like no bueno if y'all don't match on this. And this is your phenotype matching right down in here where you're just like, do we look alike or not? You know what I mean? To me, if you look alike or not, okay, that's a personal preference, you know. But I think, is your spirit the same? Are you cut from the same cloth? Are you the same kind of people? Is more important. I hope you enjoyed this part of the lecture. We'll move into the next two lectures. Will both be about romantic relationships or love. And so I will see you next time.